Welcome to Living a Conscious Life podcast, where we explore and discuss the importance of finding more peace, wholeness, and freedom in our lives. I'm Don Johnson, your host, an American living in Scotland. Being conscious means being awake, being present. When we're present, we can pay more attention to what's happening within us and around us. We can make better choices and be more effective at whatever we're doing. Living a conscious life is about bringing more self-awareness into our lives. Let's get into it. My guest today is Paul Drescher, and I want to introduce Paul to you and just read you a couple of things about who he is and his background. So Paul Drescher was initiated into the cult of Guru Maharaji and Divine Light Mission in May 1972 at the age of 18. He lived in the Detroit ashram for 3 years and was there for the infamous cream pie incident in August 1973. I remember it well. He left the ashram in May 1976, cold turkey, having no further contact with Divine Light Mission after that. He went to college, moved to California, where he became licensed in real estate, then securities, and then tax prep, and for over 30 years had a tax and financial advisory practice. He retired 8 years ago. For the last 12 years, he served as the director of the Santa Cruz Jewish Film Festival. He has studied filmmaking in the Sundance Institute's Collab program and has been a producer of several short and feature films, including the soon-to-be-released One of the Good Ones. You got to tell us about that a little bit later, Paul. And you can find him on Facebook and Instagram as Paul Bright Guy. Paul, welcome to Living a Conscious Life, the podcast.
Thank you, Don. Great to be here. Great to make your acquaintance.
Yeah, no, it's been great chatting with you and getting to know you because I didn't know you back in the day. So it's fabulous to be here with you and to talk about a common experience that we both have. And you've got a very fascinating background, having started very young in this thing. I mean, and of course, when I say young, 18 to me is quite young. I was 21, and I also want to give acknowledgement to the children of Premies who were raised, from the time they were a little kid. They have a unique experience that is, I think, unbelievable and very difficult once they start to untangle. You and me, a little bit later in life, we're lucky, perhaps, but nevertheless, welcome. And maybe you could just, talk to us a little bit about your, 3-4 years, deep down the rabbit hole and how it was for you and how you came to kind of unplug, after, only 3-4 years.
Yeah, well, there's a lot to unpack there, Don. And, I'll try to break it up into chunks so that we can, have some back and forth here. But, I was looking for truth. I was looking for meaning in my life, having been raised in a, middle class or upper middle class family and, drenched in materialism and, superficial religion. I'm Jewish. I run the Santa Cruz Jewish Film Festival. So, I just never connected with the conservative upbringing that I had. I left Judaism, as soon as I could after my bar mitzvah, and it took me decades to get back to that. But in between, I discovered before I graduated from high school, the 14-year-old perfect master, Guru Maharaji. I was out in Denver, and his poster was on every fucking lamppost in town. And, I went to satsang and, people were blissed out, I just never felt so much love from strangers before. And, they were all so happy and seemingly having some secret knowledge that made their life so much better. And, whatever they had, I wanted. The story was a little incredible. 14-year-old incarnation of God, come to bring peace on earth. But, if all these young people were so happy and seemingly have found truth, well, I was an open-minded guy. I want to give it a try. And so, I received knowledge in May of 1972 at the age of 18 from Rajaswar, and had a profound out-of-body experience during my initiation. And I had no explanation for that. I mean, I merged with light. I left my body. I was in another world. There was infinite peace and love, for probably only about 2 seconds. And my mind went, wow, and whoosh, back in my body. And how could that happen? This was more profound than any psychedelic drug I'd ever taken, and there were no drugs involved. So, with no other explanation, I bought the story. This was the incarnation of God come to bring peace on earth. And, here I was looking for meaning and doing something meaningful in my life. What greater purpose in life than to help the Messiah bring about the kingdom of heaven on earth? So I threw myself into it whole hog. I went to India in 1973 on the jumbo jets with 2,000 or so other Western devotees or premies.
Yep. Yep.
Never met Guru. I mean, I stood in line to kiss Guru Maharaj's feet. I don't know how many times, including in India, but then came back and had a very brief time at the University of Michigan, but I was just not into studying in college when, this so revolutionary, important change was happening on earth where, the Messiah was here. The most important thing for me to do was to help the Messiah, right? So,
Yep.
I joined the ashram in Detroit, and I lived in the Detroit ashram for about 3 years or so. And interesting, just working menial jobs, up at 6 a.m. to sing devotional songs, RT, meditate for an hour, go to my job. I had this menial job of driving a delivery truck, dry cleaning, and then working in a shoe warehouse. And, my paycheck was made out to Divine Light Mission. So I didn't even get credit for Social Security. I saw nothing from my paycheck. And, beans and rice and dal, living a vegetarian, aesthetic, monastic life in this house with another, 8 or 10 other people. And, it was a devotional life. I was a monk in plain clothes, working a regular job, but I thought I was contributing in some way to bringing about peace on earth. And it took a while before I became disillusioned and began to see the cracks and the fraud in this whole narrative that I'd been given.
I want to hear about that in just a moment. I'm smiling because your story is my story, is the story of thousands of other people, right? We saw the
Tens of
opportunity.
thousands, hundreds of thousands.
Tens of thousands. We saw the opportunity. We're looking for truth, and there was all this love, and there was the innocent, 14-year-old boy. I mean, what could be wrong with this picture?
Exactly.
It was all magical, and there were magical stories about how he became the perfect master that were floating all over the place. That now I know were not the way that it really was, according to eyewitnesses and so on and so forth. But your story, my story, you're in Detroit. I was in Boston. I wanted to be part of this movement. And I thought, well, hell, I'm getting in at ground zero. I must be one of the chosen ones. So I feel special. And this is part of the mystique, right? The belief. The belief gets created that you're one of the chosen ones. Wow. It's so potent, isn't it? So how did you untangle? Like, you said you went cold turkey. So just how was that? What happened?
It was rather a lengthy exit, quite honestly, because I was very dissatisfied in the ashram in Detroit. I was always a top straight A student, and I had creative aspirations. Won awards for my filmmaking in high school. And I felt that my talents and what I had to offer was not being fully utilized. I was just being basically treated like a slave laborer, and somehow that was, a lesson in humility. Okay. And but ultimately, I began to see that there were secrets being kept from me, and that the management and the ashram and in the higher ups were hiding stuff from us. And there were stories circulating about Guru Maharaji, and of course, in 1974, is it or 70? When did he get married? What do you remember? What year it was? It was
Like maybe 73 or 4, maybe 74.
16.
So I think 74.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was spring of 74.
Yeah. I think you're right.
Mm.
Maybe summer. So anyway, somewhere in there,
And then
73 or
and then
74.
the breakup of the Holy Family, which somebody's got to make a movie about this. I mean,
Yeah, we're
uh,
hoping.
and we're trying, but
We're
it's an
trying.
uphill struggle.
It's an uphill struggle, is right.
They got a bevy of high-powered lawyers to make sure the story doesn't get out there.
Yeah, let's bookmark that. Come back. Let's come
How
back
I
to
left. Yeah. So
let's yeah,
anyway,
let's come back to that. But how you
okay.
left, yeah.
Yeah, and of course I was in Detroit for the infamous pie incident where Pat Haley hit Guru
Mhm.
Maharaj in the face with a pie in August of '73.
Yeah.
And then Mahatma Fakiranand took out revenge and cracked his skull open with an upholstery hammer that he stole from our garage, escaped to Chicago, and then was given free exit from the country without any prosecution or any consequence to him personally. So, all right, that was explained as this guy's just a fanatic, operating independently, out of his, extreme devotion. So all along we're making excuses,
Hold on.
for this horrendous behavior.
Yeah. Let me insert just a thought here before you finish your story. So just for the listeners, and for those of us that were there at the time, that's what we heard. Fakiranan was portrayed to be a nut job, and he was an intense guy. He showed me the techniques in November of 72. I thought he was about as fanatical as you could get. I mean, I didn't know that many, Indian Mahatmas, but I thought this guy is really devoted, and he hammered on people in the knowledge session to give as much as money as they could to Maharaji and so on and so on. But anyway, that's correct. So back to you.
Yeah. So anyway, so that was, I guess, the first big lie or secret. And the question, and the breakup of the Holy Family. Well, if this is really God, I mean, how is it that the family is breaking up over, who's the Messiah? I mean, it was a little screwy. And of course, the tabloids made hay of this briefly. But we didn't get the newspapers or watch TV, and we discounted everything that the media was reporting because we knew we had received knowledge. We had the vision. They didn't. They were just, again, tabloid operators and, looking for their soap opera story, which this had all the elements of a soap opera and then some, So anyway, there was an accumulation of these incidents, doubts and incongruities, hidden deceptions and hypocrisies that just built up over time. Yeah. And here I was slaving away. My life is, what should have been the really building area that, a critical period in my life, 18 to 22, when, you really explore and learn and find out what it is, who you are, what you want to do with your life. I mean, here I was just slaving away, as a subordinate, this spiritual cause that I began to have doubts about. Anyway, so I complained, and about 3 years in, they said, okay, well, we'll send you to Houston. There you can have a management position. Great. I wanted more responsibility. I wanted to pursue, use my talents and abilities. So they put me on a plane to Houston. I land in Houston, And there's no management position for me there. They were just shuffling me off to shut me up and get me farther away from, I don't know, my family. I don't know. So I had to get another menial job in Houston. Now, do you want me to go into the whole exit
No,
story here, or just to
well,
give you the broad brush?
yeah, no, just the highlights, like just, like what was the final straw and that, kind of moved you out of, I don't get, was it the Houston ashram? Was that the last stomping
Yeah,
ground for you?
I pulled a couple of pranks in the Houston
Oh
ashram, which
yeah.
didn't win me any friends there. And then they sent me down to San Antonio for what was then the City of Love and Light, 2 floors of this old hotel in downtown San
Mm,
Antonio, which was an experiment. The Divine Light Mission
yeah.
had this experiment for
Yeah.
people looking to join the ashram or feeling maybe they don't belong in the ashram and looking
Yeah.
for to figure it out if they should leave. So I was there for a couple of months, and that's where I left the ashram. Started talking to my parents again. And
Yeah.
May of '76, they sent me a plane ticket. I flew back to Michigan and never had anything to do with Divine Light Mission again until recently. The
Mhm.
last, I don't know, five years or so, 10 years maybe, reconnecting with ex-premies and discovering the Prem Rawat bio website,
Mhm.
and learning so much about what was happening behind the scenes and
Mhm.
hearing the stories of other premies, other devotees,
Yeah.
which was so inspirational to me because for so many years I felt completely alone. I couldn't talk to anybody about this. I was
Yeah.
ashamed that I'd lost 4 years to this con man in this
Yeah.
profound initiation that took me decades to understand what had
Yeah.
happened to me.
Yeah.
Um, so
Yeah.
uh, it was traumatic. It was traumatic in a number of ways.
Mhm.
The spiritual fraud, of course, is deeply traumatic because here I believed that the Guru Maharaji was the incarnation of God, and it turned out that God was a liar and a fraud. Well, if God is a liar and a fraud, then where do you put your faith? What do
Mhm.
you believe in? Is it really true then that the only thing in life is materialism? That there is no spiritual meaning behind any of this? It's all just for personal, aggrandizement and wealth accumulation. I mean, really? Were my parents
Mm.
right? It's just we live in a
Mhm.
material world, and that's all there is. So,
Yeah.
for 30 years, I was a spiritual cynic and I had wanted nothing to do with anything spiritual or religious.
Mhm.
So, that was a
Yeah.
trauma. And
Yeah.
then making sense of this, okay, he's a fraud. I got conned, but there's still meaning in life. There's still a deeper meaning. And, it's interesting. In all of Guru Maharaj's speeches, the one word you almost never hear, I'd never heard it come out of his mouth, is compassion or
Mm.
empathy.
Mm.
That's not in the lexicon. It's
No.
very much a self-centered philosophy, a feel-good philosophy, with this revered leader at the top who can do no wrong,
Yeah.
and therefore gives license to people so long as they remain faithful to basically act out for their own self gratification, and it's a very self centered philosophy with this uh, paradox
Yeah.
of the all powerful, all knowing
Yeah.
leader at the top who can never be questioned.
And who can do no wrong? Yeah.
Yes.
Your comment about compassion really struck me in the sense that I don't remember hearing that word.
Nope. Look
Uh,
up, search for it through his speeches.
exactly.
I
I,
think you'd
yep.
be hard pressed to find it. Maybe
Yeah.
once in 100 speeches.
Yeah. Well, I totally get it. And, an example for our listeners, and there may be some people who aren't familiar with all of his shenanigans, and which I think we should highlight a few of the big ones, the main ones. Spiritual fraud is probably the big one, but there's others, there's a whole list. But interestingly, for people that don't know, like So when I was the president of Elan Vital in 83 or 84, from the 80 to 83 or 4, there were about, I'm guessing maybe 50 instructors in the US and maybe more around the world. I don't remember the exact number. But the way that when that decision was made to downsize Elan Vital, when he moved from Miami to back to Malibu, the ashrams were closed. The staff at Elan Vital, which I was part of, was shut down except for me and my assistant, who eventually became my wife. She answered Meraji's mail at the time, wrote little notes on his behalf, la la la. But the way that the ashram premies were treated was horrific. Just closed, just thrown out. Some people had credit card bills stuck to their name, on and on it goes. The instructors who, when you became an instructor, you believed you were dedicating your life to Meraji forever. It wasn't like a 1-year gig. It was the belief, the mindset was, this is a life now commitment. I'm now giving myself to him. And these were people, and I knew all of them, that were very dedicated, very devoted, gave everything they had to the job. You're traveling around the world by yourself and this and that and the other thing. Anyway, when it came to the end of the road, they got a phone call from Michael Donner saying it's over. There's no more instructor. You're not an instructor anymore. And the deal was you get a one-way ticket to any place that you want. That's it. Nothing. No message from Guru Maharaji. No thank you. No compassion. No nothing. Done like that. Cut off like you didn't exist. So there's a good example of lack of empathy, lack of compassion, treating people like cogs in a machine, and when they're done, you just get a new one. Get new people.
Throwing them out like trash.
Now, exactly. So so there's so many places to go here, Paul. Where do I go next?
You're called on. Pick a question.
Gosh, oh my goodness, I don't know. There's just so much to say, but let's have some fun with it. So you got on the Prem Bio website or the premi.org, and I guess Donner and Detmers, their letters. Donner and Detmers, for people that don't know these guys. Michael Detmers was Prem's right-hand man. He set up his legal and financial affairs in the late 70s. He took over from Bob Mishler, and then Detmers, set up a construct so that everything was legitimized in terms of businesses and finance and tax, all this stuff. And then Michael Donner was like kind of a peer to Detmers. Well, not quite a peer. He was sort of under Detmers, because it was basically Meraji, Detmers, and then there was Donner and a whole bunch of other people. And I reported into Detmers, so I wasn't quite there. But nevertheless, so these two guys had a lot of personal contact with Prem. They were, quote, X-rated. I guess that means they could. What does that mean, actually? I guess
X-rated means top secret.
Top secret.
What
So
they saw, what they heard in this X circle of X did not leave that circle.
Exactly. So, except when God bless the internet, when the internet came out, and I guess there were a couple of people that we should give credit to, whether it's Joe Whalen or John Brawns or people who ever started, Tom Gubler, who started these websites, then Michael Detmers and Donner posted their personal experiences with Prem. And we read some things on there that probably confirmed what we might have intuited or thought. But seeing it in black and white, I don't know about you, but my head spun around.
No, absolutely. When I started reading some of these stories that I was completely unaware of from higher ups, people with personal experience, people cleaning up the empty bottles of cognac, testifying to the him going to bed drunk every night for a period of time, the affairs. And
the mistress, the affairs, the premies that were recruited by Michael Detmers to have personal, intimate liaisons with Prem Rawat.
And then also these women used and thrown away like trash.
Yeah, exactly. No no empathy, no compassion, just
Right.
used and tossed aside. So this is the mind-blowing stuff, right? So, and people that you and I know that we probably lived in the ashram with are still very loyal to Prem Rawat, and they know all this stuff about how he behaved. And I try to get my head around that, and I can't. I don't get it, except for the fact that I understand when you have a belief about something, everything gets filtered through the belief. And until you let your belief go, you rationalize, and it's okay because he's the one. He can. How does it work, Paul? How do we how do we
Uh,
make how do we make sense of this?
there's a very powerful psychological phenomenon or called cognitive dissonance,
Yeah.
and it's cognitive bias, I think. That is, when you see something that disrupts your framing of the world, your world view and belief system, the natural human instinct is to deny that. Because, especially when you've incorporated that belief system into your identity,
Hmm.
and that was what's so difficult about leaving the ashram, leaving
Hmm.
any cult, is that you've incorporated this belief system into your identity, and then when you reject it, and you're in a way rejecting yourself. That is
Hmm.
who you were or who
Hmm.
you are, and you have to rebuild this identity in another way. And again, with something that is spiritual and deep, where
Yeah.
that foundation itself has been shaken or destroyed. I mean, it's and especially when you can't really talk about it with other people unless they've been through the same thing. I mean, my parents didn't understand, my family didn't understand, so it was it was really a very harsh return to the real world, I
Yeah.
think, for me and for anybody leaving a cult.
What gets me is, well, many things get me about this, but one thing that gets me is the fact that I asked myself, why would I? So originally the idea was, Baraji used to talk about the definition of guru, gu and ru, from darkness to light. So I'm thinking, okay, a guide can take me from where I am to the other side, or it's like you need a guide to take you through the mountain passes, somebody that's been there before. That was the story. Like, well, you need a guide because you've never been there before. I'm like, okay, that makes sense logically, la la la, right? And then when I hear all this stuff about him, I'm thinking like, okay, wait a minute. So he's getting intoxicated heavily intoxicated at a young age. Let's say he's 17, 18, 19, 20, into the 20s, and so on. And when I spoke to Hans Rawat, his eldest son, Hans would say when he got drunk, he was a mean drunk. He wasn't a nice, happy drunk. He would yell at people, yell at his staff, yell at his wife, yell at his kids. So, you hear this stuff and I go, okay, so why would I need a person like that in my life, particularly to follow? I don't have friends like that. So why would I bow down to somebody who is unhinged? And let's face it, I mean, when you anesthetize yourself day after day after day after day, you have to raise the question, what kind of trauma is being covered up? And I don't know, but I could guess.
Um, it took, again, decades for me to try to figure out how he could have pulled this off from the age of 8. And I'd love to hear more about the founding when he was given the job of to succeed his father as leader of Defiant Mission and quote
Mhm.
unquote perfect master. Because I don't have that inside information, but I do understand that he is a human being, and for him to be able to manage the hypocrisy of lying to millions of people and pretending that he is God incarnate, perfect master, blah blah blah. I
Yeah.
mean that he knew at a certain point. Maybe at the age of 8, he actually believed that he was somehow endowed because he'd been treated like a god, from the day he was born, revered as the son of a holy man. But at a certain point, and whether it was, as a teenager or a young adult, at some point he realizes, what, I'm lying. How do I rationalize this? How do I? And his way of dealing with it was to become a drunk. That he would go on stage and perform, every day or very frequently, and he'd have his speech, platitudes, and indoctrination, very coy, talking about himself in the third person, Guru Maharaji this, Guru Maharaji that,
Right.
Kind of off load, the self-aggrandizement, and I am God. Never come out and said in 3 words, I am God, but that was the underlying message. And so when you lead that kind of deceitful life, alcohol is a good way to make it all disappear, at least during your drunkenness.
No, well said. You talked about how he became the perfect master. Let's just talk about that for a minute. I've read some pieces that were put out on one of the websites from a former major donor who had a conversation with Guru Charanand at one point, and Charanand told the story to him about how Prem became perfect master, which was basically Mataji, the mother, and some of the other brothers were in one room arguing about who would be the next perfect master. And generally speaking, it went to the eldest son. That would have been Bal Bhagwanji, right? So there's a contingent over there, but then there was another contingent of younger Mahatmas, Sampurnand, Gurucharanand, maybe Mahabir, maybe Bahari Singh, maybe a few others. And they, on their own, decided that they were going to put Prem on the stage, and they marched him out there before the other group could interfere. And by that time, it was too late. And there you go. And then when you look at the history, it kind of makes sense because you can see that those 3 or 4 men were around him ever since. Bahari Singh got into a little bit of trouble at one point, I think, because he maybe switched sides for a while. But the loyalty that Prem gave to Sampurnand, who became the director of DLM in India. Gurucharanand was always the top dog. Mahabir was always around. So there you go. So to your point, a young boy gets anointed. He's in school at the time, so he plays the role of like, I'm a schoolboy, but then he comes home and everybody's worshiping him. So imagine the psychology of that as you build your psyche, as you grow, your brain develops believing that you're superhuman.
It's a messed up story and a messed up family. I could use a more colorful word.
Oh no, yeah, you could. You could, and and the tragedy is it's still a messed up family. The way that Hans Rawat was treated at his brother by Prem Rawat, and he talks about how they were sexually abused. He called his father out on it. His father admitted it, said it was common in India. La la la. I'm sorry. He apologized. I'm sorry. I didn't realize it at the time. Wow. Well, maybe because you were stoned, maybe because you were drunk, maybe because you were full of yourself. But still, you abuse the privacy of a child. Imagine you've had kids. I've had kids. Do you have kids?
Yeah, I have 3 boys.
Right.
Adults.
I mean, I remember when my children grew up, they had a bedroom and the door was closed. There was only one thing that I could do if I wanted to go in that bedroom was to knock on the door. I never opened that door and just went in. I just believe that a human being has a right to privacy, a child, an adult, it doesn't matter. Yeah. But Hans did not have that luxury.
Prem adopted every Western value except respect for another person and the privacy of their private parts, you could say. It never would cross my mind to harm a child or to sexually abuse a child for amusement. That comes out of a sick mind. And you could say, oh, well, it's common in India, doesn't make it right. And certainly it doesn't make it legal. In this country, and in most of the Western world, sexual abuse of a child is illegal and punishable, and you'll go to prison for it, and you won't be treated well in prison for it either.
No. And you're right. And in the state of Florida, if these allegations were brought up years ago, he would have been in jail.
Yeah.
The perfect master, because he broke the laws of a state that has very specific laws about children and the age and adults' behavior with those children. So it's it's a tragic thing. He's a tragic. I think Prem Rawat is a tragic figure, and it's just a sad state. And my heart goes out to people like Hans and anybody that was had to deal with this. It's just tragic. So
yeah.
All right. Well, anyway, so yeah. So do you think Prem Rawat meditates an hour each day as he instructs all his followers, Paul?
Oh, I doubt that Prem Rawat meditates more than 10, 15 seconds at a time, if at all. He is driven by an enormous ego and completely unrestrained. His executive function is without bounds, it appears. And no, he's the biggest hypocrite that I've ever met. I've never met him in person, but certainly from what he speaks and what he does, I doubt I could find a greater disparity between saying and doing. Saying all these wonderful platitudes about life, valuing life and enjoying life and making the most of life, and then behaving in such a way that is so disrespectful of other human beings.
Yeah. And yet he's got this giant PR machine out there pumping out things like, well, the Guinness Book of World Records now is under his belt for the most people at a book launch or something. He's got the thing in the prisons. He's got the words of peace. He's got the school thing and all this. And I'm looking at that. I'm going, oh my God, he's just creating this machine so that when he dies, he's got this mechanism run by his loyal children who know what happened but are turning a blind eye to that, and there's this mechanism set up to continue the teachings and so on.
Yeah, he said it wasn't a religion, but he's created a religion. And it is for his benefit, yet somehow he manages to maintain the nonprofit status. I wish the IRS would dig deeper into that.
Yeah,
but it's again, that's just one more of the big lie.
But he's got a big machine and he's got deep pockets, and we know this. You said something earlier that there was a possibility of a documentary being done, and there still is a possibility of documentaries being done. There's multiple things that are still out there in play, but the one that got kind of off the ground was shut down by a Beverly Hills law firm hired by Prem Rawat with a big slap letter to the documentarian warning him about what might happen if they went ahead with this film. So, and people that saw my previous podcast know that a podcast that I was going to go on the host was threatened with a letter from a very prestigious anti-defamation law firm hired by Prem Rawat to shut her down. And as a consequence, that podcast never got off the ground. So he has the funds to censor.
Oh, and does so without restraint. Now, you were around when the whole legitimacy project began, weren't you?
I don't know what that is.
Oh, there was a legitimacy project began in the 80s where they did the twist. Okay, so he's, it was back and forth for a little while. Perfect Master, not Perfect Master. Lord of the Universe, not Lord of the Universe. And then the business-minded people said, you know what, we got to change the story here because we're not getting people with the Lord of the Universe story.
I was around. I was around. Yeah. Okay. I wasn't sure what you meant. Yeah.
Yeah. So, the administration of Divine Light Mission went on this quest to change the image, change the narrative. And that's when they changed it from Divine Light Mission to Elan Vital. They renamed
Yeah.
the organization.
Yeah.
On the original founding paperwork, it's still Divine Light Mission. So that, they didn't start over wholesale. They just did a
Yeah.
superficial
Yeah.
makeover to change the image and change the branding.
And got rid of all the old books, tapes, photos, the Krishna crown, Lala, all that stuff.
Told
The,
everybody to
the
burn it,
there was
burn
no.
everything.
I guess
a
there was
big misunderstanding.
there was no more merry jesters, all that kind of stuff. But so here's the question, Paul. So so at the time we were told that he was the perfect master. Now, then, the name Guru Maharaji got shortened to Maharaji, right? And then at some point, he became Prem Rawat. I don't know. That must have been in the 90s. I wasn't, or late 90s. I don't know when that happened. But nevertheless, so now he's a global peace ambassador and author. So does that mean that he's not the perfect master anymore? But that's hypocritical because we believed he was the perfect master. He told us he was the perfect master. But so now he's the global. Whoa, what's going on there? Who is he?
Well, I have not. I no longer have the confidence of people who are still involved, and so I think if you dig deep, that there's been a regeneration of this whole we're special, of the original devotees. Okay, we know he's God incarnate. We know he's a perfect master, but we gotta. The rest of the people, they can't accept that. So we have to tone it down for everybody else in order to bring this message to everybody. That's what I think is going on. Because again, this is a way for people to rationalize the cognitive dissonance.
Right.
That okay, perfect master, not perfect master. Guru Maharaji, not Guru Maharaji. Oh, I get it. We're special. We know. And of course, then we can spend $3,000 or $5,000 for a week in a tent in Amaru and line up and kiss his feet because we're the privileged ones, right? We know the truth.
And you know what he said? Somebody that was in 2023, I believe this was, somebody at Amaru told me that they sent me some screenshots of some of the things, his statements, very grandiose stuff. But one of the thing that really struck me was he emphasized, he said, it's not just enough to stay in touch or to do meditation. The most important thing is, you ready? Obey the master. Obedience to the master. Same story that's been going on since the 70s. He's still saying it. Oh my God.
I mean, the directives are a little looser. No longer, poverty, chastity, and obedience. He let go of that. Tithing or contributing. I mean, everybody's expected to give money, and now they can give it tax deductively to the foundation, which pays all of his travel expenses for spreading this wonderful word of peace. And what does it take for somebody to see that this is a racket? I mean, I don't know. I mean, if they've been in it for 50 years, I doubt they're changing now.
No, I think the core, the hardcore group keeps sort of shrinking, and the hardcore group is pretty gray haired. So that hardcore group is going to be dying off pretty soon. Where it goes after that, who the heck knows? But so if we agree that Prem Rawat committed spiritual fraud, what should his punishment be? If we were, the judges, I don't know.
Well, I wrote him a letter a few years ago, which of course went unanswered, saying, that, I was the victim, along with tens of thousands of other ashram premis, of this great spiritual fraud. And, he took our money under false pretenses.
Yeah.
That's fraud. But unfortunately, the statute of limitations has passed, so I can't sue to get that money back. There is, and when I did find out I'd been defrauded, I was too ashamed to do anything about it or talk to anybody about it.
Mm-hmm.
But if he actually wanted to come clean, I mean, we are the guys that made him a millionaire from our wages, slave wages in the 1970s and 1980s. So under these fraudulent pretenses.
Yeah.
So first of all, he needs to pay everybody back who gave him money during those 20 years of the main fraud when he was God incarnate, perfect master. And, but he's never going to do that.
I know, but it's fun to imagine like what should or could be done, or what, and we know that it won't be done, but you know, you, me, other people are speaking out, putting a voice to this. In a perfect world, maybe a film will be done. I don't know. Maybe a book will be written. Uh, Maybe somebody will speak up who hasn't spoken up, because there's so many people that are got their lips buttoned up out there. And I know a lot of them, and I'd love to call you out by name, but I won't. And you know the truth about Prem Rawat. And for some reason, you just go along with it. It's really pretty sad.
It's pathetic. I don't know how somebody can live with themselves
Beats
uh,
me.
going along with
Well,
this lie and this
well,
fraud.
they get front row seats, they get to go to a little dinner party. They get served up well, I don't know if they're going to get the calf that was massaged by the woman whose job it was to just massage the calf. You heard about this in Amaru,
Yeah.
right? You're right. So I don't know if they get to eat some of that massaged beef. Maybe they do, and they're like, well, it's just worth it, to do all this. Um, but anyway, you know what? Here's the thing. The good thing is, you recovered. You built yourself a wonderful career. I mean, I recovered. It took me time. I sold women's shoes. I was selling vacuum cleaners door to door after I left my position as president of Elan Vital. I was in ritual humiliation for a number of years, which just took my big spiritual ego that I had been fed and just poked it full of holes and beat me down. And, I became like a normal human being. It took a while, to get over the fact that I was in the cult of the perfect master. So, but so you got into some very cool things, and let's, wrap it up a little bit and talk about, your life now and what you've accomplished and so on. And I'm just curious about, you've got this soon to be released film, one of the good ones. Maybe you want to tell our listeners, what's cooking in your life now, and what's that all about?
Well, I would have loved to have a career in film and video production. I wanted to be a comedy writer, actor, director. The lost 4 years in the ashram set me back a ways. I had an unfortunate time in college as well, where I was sabotaged and went into a depression and had to give up on those dreams. But I moved out to California and put down roots. And the best decision I ever made. It's paradise here. And I just figured out I want to live here. What do I got to do to make money? And so that's I just went after making a living, and I figured out that I figured that, well, if money really was the essence of this game that we call life, that money is the essential factor, then, well, I might as well go straight for the money and become a financial advisor, because if I could figure out how that the money game is played, well, then I'm home free. So I abandoned my dream of performing and making movies, and for 30 years, was just advising people on taxes and investments. But my wife, and I bless her soul, passed away 12 years ago, and kids, went to college, and after my youngest son graduated college, there was just no reason for me to continue working in the financial world anymore. It's not who I was. It's not what I wanted to make of my life. So I handed off the business to a younger guy, took a nice final paycheck, and decided, I'm going to pursue my dreams. So I started studying with the Sundance Institute Collab program and took classes in screenwriting a bunch of times and producing and directing and the business of movies, and made connections with other filmmakers, mostly younger than me and mostly poorer than me. And so through those connections, I have been involved in a few short films. I'm a producer, production assistant, and a background actor in this short web series called Hot Angry Mom, which is still making the rounds on YouTube and hopefully getting a development gig for a TV series. I was involved in a couple of other films, and the most recent one of the good ones, was just shot in Buffalo in February. So I'm a producer on that.
Buffalo, New York, in
Buffalo, New
February.
York. Yeah,
It's a little
it's
chilly
about
up there in February, isn't it?
yeah. And at the last minute, I stayed home. They really didn't need me on set.
Okay, lucky
And
you.
I don't regret it. I
Yeah.
mean, there was this plane that landed in Toronto, which is like 200 miles from Buffalo, landed upside down. You remember that?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That was a
yeah.
week before I was supposed to fly to Buffalo.
Ooh, oh
I'm
boy.
leaving California where it's 65, 70 degrees, going to Buffalo where it's 0 to 20. And I've been on set. This was a 9-day shoot, 12 to 15-hour days. And I thought, wait a second. I'm going to be, a chauffeur and getting coffee and, holding lighting or whatever. They can find somebody else for that. Anyway, so I wasn't part of the production, but I was part of pre-production. I'm part of post-production, and I'm, I've talked to the producer and star, several times a week, because I bring the legal and financial, well, maybe not the legal, but I bring the financial expertise to the project. And the one thing about movie making is capital-intensive art in existence. That this movie was shot for about $100,000, which is like micro budget for a feature film.
Right.
It's in post production now. It'll be entered into festival competitions in the fall. Independent productions, there's no guarantee of success. The odds are really against it. But this is about the Legal Disciplinary Office in Buffalo. So it's a story of morality. Lawyers Gone Bad was the original title. Some people think we should keep the original title.
Right. Yeah, it's a little edgy, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
kind
it's,
of like maybe the name of, maybe it's Prem Rawat's film, the documentary should Guru Gone Bad. Maybe that
Guru Gone Bad would be great. A great
maybe that.
title. Yes.
Well, I
Anyway,
wish.
so hopefully with that, we'll make the festival rounds. And, if you follow my
Good.
Facebook page, I generally will post links to anything that I am connected to when it becomes publicly available.
Well, I hope all our listeners are going to follow you, and I wish you well on the film. As we're wrapping up here, it just strikes me that, I see you as a very grounded, happy kind of person. I mean, your energy is really good, and I'm having a good time with you. And usually that's a good sign, in terms of just that your inner world is in good shape. And I remember back in the day when you and I were in the ashram that there was this thing called Manmat, which was follower of the mind, Indian word. And it was basically about, like, if you left Guru Maharaji, then that was like basically the kiss of death. You might as well just, check out. You're going to have a miserable time. Your mind's going to chew you up. You imagine this, like, inside little thing just chewing on you and eating you up. And here we are. We're in pretty darn good shape. I still practice meditation, not according to the rules of Prem Rawat, but I still do my thing, right? And I've said this to other people. The experience that I have within me, and I know this is heresy for those people that are practicing knowledge 15 minutes on each technique for an hour every day. I still have the same experience inside that I had when I was sitting under the sheet for 2 hours, following the letter of the law. Now, what's that all about, one might ask? Do you know what I mean? Like, does Prem Rawat have a corner of the market? I don't think so.
No.
What were you going to say? You got something cooking in.
Prem Rawat does not have a corner of the market on being true to yourself and having a moral, ethical foundation in which you know yourself and your purpose in life. You know, the one thing of people I live with in the ashram, they're all good people. They all want to make the world a better place. They and I and you were misled by this fraudulent guru into believing that he was, to paraphrase, the way, the truth, and the light.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That was the message that we were given. And it wasn't true. And it isn't true. That each of us has to find within ourselves, who we are and what we live for. And there's joy in that. There's joy in being who you are, in trying to make the world a better place, in being kind and compassionate, empathetic to other people, in seeing the difference between right and wrong. I couldn't live with myself if I were committing acts of evil, if I hurt children or animals or, insulted people at every opportunity. That's not the person I am. That's not who I want to be. But we have the ability to be anybody we want. And we can be a good person or we can be a bad person. You can help others or you can hurt others. So Guru Maharaji or Maharaji is really unnecessary in any of that. He's got some nice things to say about finding joy in life, appreciating life, gratitude, but he is not the arbiter of all this. He is not. We used to believe that everything came from Guru Maharaji, right? All joy came from Guru Maharaji. He was the source of all love.
Right.
That's a lie.
Yeah.
It's people. I do think people are in love with him or at the idea of him, and that is part of the reason why they keep coming back to places like Amaru, because to be with other people in that environment of worship of this what we would call a false god, but nonetheless, there's that community. There's a community there.
There's community. No, people want community. I get that.
Absolutely, and that's the value.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you wanted it. I wanted it too when I first came around. I was like, wow, all these people are awesome people. They were dear friends of mine for many, many years. They're full of love. They're beautiful people. I love, I still love them today. I do. They're beautiful people. I know that. But your point is right. We don't need him.
It's a big wide world.
Yeah.
There's a lot confusing going on in the world, a lot to make sense of.
Yeah.
Guru Maharaji simplified it to make the world comprehensible to people that need guidance.
Yeah.
There's so many sources of good information. There's so many sources of inspiration. There's so many sources of meditation techniques. I mean, I practice, mindfulness meditation, the breathing technique, on and off throughout the day whenever I need to focus, center myself. It only takes a few seconds. I don't push on my eyeballs anymore. I don't stick my tongue down my throat anymore. That's the most ludicrous of the four techniques. Postnasal drip is somehow nectar. But we can find meaning. We can find meaning, purpose.
I don't know, Paul.
In this life without this phony guru.
I don't know, Paul. I think you've wandered off the sacred path. I'll have to send you some videos or something for you to watch. Maybe
get me back on track. Yeah.
Get you back on track. But seriously, I love that before we started talking about this, the message that you gave about, almost like advice to people in anybody, particularly if you're interested in growth and being moving towards wholeness. You had a beautiful message about just, finding yourself and pursuing kindness and gratitude and compassion and empathy. And it's a beautiful message. I just want to say that I really love that you were saying that. And I think, that might be the place where we kind of wrap things up, because we've been a little over an hour, which has
Oh,
been fab.
time has
So,
flown by, Don. It
and,
seems like
and,
15
and
minutes.
I know. And anybody that's listened this long, God bless you. I mean,
Thank you. Yes.
thank you for listening, and I hope it's helpful. And, please follow Paul on Instagram and Facebook. And Paul, keep us updated as you see fit. Love to, wish you all the success with the film and everything else that you're doing in your life. Keep up the great work. And it's been a pleasure to have you on the show. We really, really awesome. And I hope you had a good time, because I did.
It's been great. I love it. I'm so glad we've made this connection, Don. I support you 100% in what you're doing. We need to get the truth out there. We need to inspire people to think for themselves and live a good life, a moral life, a compassionate life. And, that's all we can do. So anyway, thank you. Thank you for having me on. And thanks to everybody who's been watching. Paul Bright Guy on Facebook and Instagram. That's how you can find me.
Thanks a million, Paul. Have a wonderful evening, day out there in California. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Living a Conscious Life, the podcast, is a co-production of Select Books, Scout Media, and myself, Don Johnson. Editing and post-production was done by Kenichi Sugihara. Our theme music, Yes It Is my own composition from my CD, Sweetwater, available on Spotify and Apple. I hope you enjoyed the program, and if you did, please subscribe to the show and give us a positive review on Apple Podcasts. For an even deeper dive into prescriptive advice with a practical footing across a wide expanse of human experience, Living a Conscious Life, the book, is available wherever books or ebooks are sold. This is Don Johnson saying thanks again, and I'll be back soon with another podcast.
And look into the sun, leave the past behind. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is.